If you can submit to a boss you don't like, then you can submit to a husband you don't like.
Dr. Tony Evans says your marriage relationship reflects your connection with Christ.
A wife who does not submit to her husband is not submitted to God, so don't tell me how spiritual you are.
This is The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans, author, speaker, and senior pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas. A lot of women think submission is a dirty word, but Dr. Evans says it's not as limiting as it seems. Let's join him as he explains why obedience can not only change your attitude, but your reality.
I believe in 2 words I can define the role of a good woman. The first thing that a good woman must do is help her man. Way back in Genesis, when God made Adam, in Genesis chapter 2, someone said that God made Adam, looked at him real hard and said, I can do a lot better than that. And that's when he made Eve. But when he did so, he says in verse 18, it is not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper. I'm going to make someone to come alongside of him who will be corresponding to him, who will work with him to accomplish the divine goal that I have given him. The role of a good woman who wants to see a strong marriage and family is to be the counterpart to her mate in such a way that which God has given to both of them, because the family belongs to both of them. The command of God to be fruitful and multiply belongs to both of them. The command to manage his creation belongs to both of them. So it is not that she is just some extra on the side. She is an indispensable part of the program. But in order for the program to work, she must be by his side as his helper. One of the reasons so many men are miserable, one of the reasons so many marriages fail, is that the woman is not out to help him. She's using the marriage to help her. Instead of being his partner, instead of coming alongside to embellish his person, instead of raising his esteem, she has become part of the opposition. She is working against the program. She is not cooperating with God's agenda for the family. She uses it as a launching pad for her own purposes. And when a woman loses sight that God's first expectation of her in relationship to her husband is to be his helper, then a negative atmosphere is created in the home that is difficult to overcome. The description of a divine helpmate is given in prolific detail in Proverbs 31, because a whole chapter was given in the Bible to explain what a helpmate looks like. We're first asked the question, an excellent wife who can find. That Hebrew word excellent means woman of nobility. A noble woman who can find. And ladies, if you want some help in your self-esteem, the Bible says her worth is far above jewels. Many ladies have a low view of themselves, which makes them a weak wife. When you look at yourself as an expensive diamond, then you're going to act like an expensive diamond. Not a plastic woman, not a woman that's so made up you don't know what the real thing looks like. He's talking about an authentic woman, and he says when a man finds this kind of woman, he's got a piece of jewelry that's expensive and of great value. And what is the hallmark of this woman? Look at the end of verse 12. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. Now, ladies, let me ask you a question. Can he look at, can he identify, can he measure how you are constantly, perpetually, ongoingly, ferociously, determinatively looking out for his good? Can he raise the point if asked the question, every time this woman wakes up, she is thinking about how to make me a better man? And if that is not, hear me now, your number one agenda item, you are not a Christian wife. You may be a bed partner, you may be a cook, you may be this and you may be that, but a Christian wife seeks the good of her husband all the days of his life. That is, she wakes up, and just as he's to wake up loving and honoring and cherishing you, you are to wake up and ask, what good can I be to him today? So the first thing a woman must do is to help her man. There's a second thing a woman must do. Ephesians 5. She must submissively reverence her man. Look at verse 33 of Ephesians 5. Nevertheless, let each individual among you love his own wife, even as himself. We went over that last week. And let the wife see to it that she respects, reverences, awes her husband. Verses 22 to 24 explains the doctrine of submission. Now, this is a bad word, not because it's a bad word, but it's been used by bad people explaining it. The word submission is a good word. But ladies, because people have defined it wrongly, you look at it and say, oh no, not that word, not the cursed S word. No, it's a good word. Why is it a good word? Because Jesus submitted himself to the will of the Father. First of all, submission has nothing to do with equality. Jesus is equal to God. Jesus is God become man. Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. So we're not talking about you being less than him. For Jesus is God of very God. Submission has to do with accomplishing a program. Jesus submitted to the Father in order to accomplish salvation. He was doing a program. Had nothing to do with whether they were equal. We saw in 1 Peter 3:7 last week that you are joint heirs, you are equal, you are to be treated as equal. It doesn't mean that you're a floor cloth. It doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It doesn't mean you're to be pressed on, beaten on, or any such thing. You are equal to any man. But when it comes to the program, submission is absolutely necessary. To submit to your husband does not mean you agree with him on everything. It means you recognize his position as head to accomplish the program. What program? The program that God has given to the family. That program. Listen to me. You say, I can't submit to that man. Preposterous. You may not agree with everything Mr. Jones at your job tells you, but you submit. If you're hauled in the court, you may not like what the judge thinks, but you submit. Because more than submitting to a person, you're submitting to a position. It's a position. God has called your husband to a position. His position is head over the house. That's not dictator. That's not boss man. The job of the head is to give direction to the body. The job of the wife is to willingly place all of her strengths under the authority of the husband to follow, listen to me ladies, to follow him as he follows Christ. That's why it says, and here's some good news for you ladies, as to the Lord. Submit to the husband as to the Lord. So you don't have to worry about him abusing you. When he leaves the Lord, he no longer is acting as your head. Did you hear me? When your husband leaves the Lord, then he no longer qualifies to be the head. That is, you're never to disobey the Lord in order to follow your husband, because your greater allegiance is to the Lord. But if this man is trying to serve the Lord, don't work against him. If this man is trying to please the Lord, he may not be doing it right. He may not be doing it perfectly. But if the man is trying to apply last week's sermon, don't work against the poor man. Why? Because he needs a helper, not a hurter. He needs an assister, not a hindrance. He needs somebody to come alongside and smooth out those rough edges. So every woman should say to her husband, beginning today, you are my leader. God has put you as head of the home. I'm going to honor you as head of the home. I'm going to follow you as head of the home. I only ask you, darling, to do one thing. Don't lead me away from Christ. Because if you lead me away from Christ, I got to leave you and go with my first love. I don't want to leave you and go with my first love, so you follow my first love so I can follow both of you. That's the idea, that he follows Christ and you follow him. But ladies, he need to hear that. He need to hear that from you. He needs to hear that you're going to honor his position, that you're going to honor his position as head of the home. You're going to reverence that position as head of the home. If you can submit to a boss you don't like, then you can submit to a husband you don't like. Because it's not about liking the husband, it's about obeying the Lord. And many of you ladies, you're coming for counseling and you say, I can't submit. How do you know? You've never tried. I can't follow. How do you know? He told you one thing and it was wrong, and now you can't listen to anything. No. Many of you ladies have never told your husbands that you're willing to come under his authority as he follows Christ to lead the home and motivate him to follow Christ. Rather, you work against him, you fuss at him, you're always griping at him. He never does anything right. He gets beaten up outside the home all day. He's got to come home to be beaten up some more when he ought to come home as somebody who's going to love him, hug him, caress him, affirm him, strengthen him, dignify him, who's going to recognize that he may not be anybody downtown, but he's somebody in this house, and I'm going to make sure he's somebody. Instead, we got ladies going around talking about men are no good, my man is no good. Maybe the reason they're no good is because they don't have anybody helping them. Maybe that's why. Maybe God gave you to him to fix up the rough points and you never caught the message. That's what headship is. Jesus submitted to the Father. A wife submits to her husband using all of her gifts and strengths for the betterment of the home. A wife who does not submit to her husband is not submitted to God, so don't tell me how spiritual you are. You can come to church every night of the week. If your husband doesn't know that you recognize his position as head, you're a carnal woman. You can read your Bible every day, have devotions, go to women's meeting, come here on Wednesday for women's Bible study. You can do all that and be out of the will of God if you don't go home and honor that man. That man may not know how to be a husband yet because he wasn't raised with a good father, have never seen a godly husband. He may not know yet. He may have to learn. It may take him some time. You are his helper, and you might as well get out of the Bible and leave church if you're not willing to say, God, I have sinned in this area. I've not been a helper. I've been a herder. I confess it as sin, and the day I'm going to tell my husband, he got help at home now. Somebody who's going to work for him and not against him. Somebody who's going to support him, not crucify him. Many of you were raised in a matriarchal environment where everybody you knew, you were waiting to exhale. Where everybody you knew was beating up on some man. Well, our men are not that bad. It's just that our men, because of various circumstances, need certain kind of help, certain kind of teaching, and certain kind of encouragement, and you are part of that. Don't mess up the opportunity.
Well, Dr. Evans will come back to explain how that process works in just a moment.